My name is Alan, and you are watching the first episode of the Sound Speeds podcast. And if you looked at my logo and said, "Isn't that Sound Podcast Speeds?" No. But I can already tell that you are the kind of person that looks at the hot Krispy Kreme donut sign and reads that as Hot Now Donuts. Don't worry, I do the exact same thing, but I do it because it's fun, not because I'm just a goofus. But regardless, you are joining me here on this stream of consciousness dumped from my brain directly to your ears. So I figured we might as well have a microphone in front of my face to let you hear every bit of it. Sorry if you don't like my voice. That's the nature of this podcast. But being that it's the first episode, you don't really know how this is going to be going along through our 6 segments today, and I'm going to be talking our way through it. Today's date is Saturday, September 14th, 2019. Let's get into it. Segment 1, as indicated by the bum that you just got through hearing, is Amazon impulse buys. Now, I am known for all my impulse buys through Amazon. As a matter of fact, if I don't have something on its way to me every single day from Amazon, then I don't know what I'm doing with my life. People always say, "Did you really need that?" Probably not. As a matter of fact, 99% of the time, I don't need it. I just bought it for fun or because I do that kind of thing. One day I got bored at work and spent $85 on different kinds of macadamia nuts, to give you an idea. But for this Amazon Impulse Buys segment, I'm going to be showing you some of the interesting things that I have found on Amazon. Perhaps it is something fun or cool. Maybe it is something functional and entertaining. It makes you smile. Or maybe it's just something that you bought because you want to have a package arriving on your doorstep in 2 days and you don't even know what it's going to be when you open it. Because just like a 6-year-old opening their birthday presents, it is just that much of a surprise. Now, for this first episode, I figured I might as well show off my brand new, very, very happy Jellyfish tank. Now, I was working on a show called P-Valley recently, and on one of the sets, spoiler alert, is going to be this exact same thing. I was watching the jellyfish swim around. I said, that is the coolest thing I've seen in a long time. I gotta have one of those by my bed. Now, you're looking at this jellyfish tank right now as it is sitting right next to my bed. The reason I have it there is it's kind of like a little night light, but it kind of also is nice to watch the jellyfish float around. If you watch it as you're going to sleep, it's nice and peaceful. If you're like me and you happen to have a television screen, or rather your phone, right there in your face with the jellyfish behind it, it's going to basically relax you at the same time as entertain you. The jellyfish, if you're wondering, are made of silicone, and there's a very little bitty fan at the bottom inside the tank, which you fill up with distilled water, and it will gently, in little, squirts, I guess you could almost say, pushing up little bits of water through a fan that jets up in there. So that way it's not on all the time. It gives you little squirts of water through this jet every now and then. So that way it looks like the jellyfish are floating around, as you can see all over the screen. There's also a button that you can press to toggle through the different colored lights that can illuminate the jellyfish. And depending on the light color that hits it, parts of the jellyfish will light up in different colors. Now, my 3-year-old absolutely loves the jellyfish lamp. She's mesmerized by it. And if you just press the button and allow it to cycle through the different colors, she's like glued to it. She's constantly saying to me, "Daddy, can we go see Mike and PB?" Mike and PB, named by my middle and oldest daughters to be short for microphone, and PB that goes along with jelly. So those are the names of my 2 jellyfish, which are, by the way, made of silicone. And it's normally sold on Amazon for around $80. You can find it on sale from time to time. I bought it when it was on sale for $60. There's a link down in the description if you'd like to check it out. Welcome to Something Sound, and for this first episode, I figured I would go over a couple of ways that you can connect up the audio-limited A10 digital transmitter to your boom pole and allow you to still quickly switch boom poles and shock mounts should you want to. Now, traditionally, if you have a microphone like this one and you connect it up to your boom, then you can connect up a cube-style transmitter onto the end of it, just like that. And you would be able to quickly switch out this microphone shock mount to different poles should you want to. Now, the A10 system is a little bit different. And the reason why is because of the way that the quick release sits with the mounting plate, which is right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove the quick release to show you what I'm talking about. The way it's designed is you would put the actual mounting plate on top of your boom pole, screw on the quick release right here, and then you would take the A10 digital transmitter and you would slide it up in there. So that way it's facing outwards. Actually, in this particular configuration, it would be going downwards and sliding up into position that way. I'm not going to do it right now because it's a little bit to manage. But now if you notice, you've lost your ability to use your quick release. It is now stuck to this pole. So in order to use a quick release now with this pole, you're going to have to undo the quick release. Now, I'm not using the Allen keys on there, but this is going to be completely annoying because you can switch out different microphones if you'd like to, or different shock mounts if you would like to. But the goal is to be able to leave your quick release on the boom pole just like this, right? So let me show you a couple of different options you have. The first one is if you were to take the mounting plate and simply connect up directly to it. You want it to go downwards, so you're going to want to take a second quick release and screw this mounting plate directly into it here. Now, this is going to be a little bit tight because this is one of the brand new, if you notice, black ambient quick releases. And it's only, at the time of this video, it's been out for maybe a couple of months, I guess. Still kind of new. So if you're not aware that Ambient now sells black quick releases, which I don't know if it had anything to do with my video that I did on SoundSpeeds talking about quick releases, but surprisingly, in my quick release video, I said that it would be really great if they made black quick releases. And what do you know, about a month later, Ambient started doing it. I don't know if it was somehow a coincidence or if it was related, but if it was related, then that's pretty awesome. I was very, very happy about that. Anyway, so this is now on. Took a little bit of time because I wanted to actually mount it again. This now is ready to mount your A10 transmitter, which is what I'm doing right now. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze to get on there. It's now clicked in place. This is now ready to mount. And notice how much quicker it is for you to simply drop into position. You can remove it as quickly as you like to, drop it back on there, put your shock mount on there, and it is ready to go. So if you get yourself an extra shock mount of some sort and then mount it up the way you just saw me do it, where you still have your quick release on your boom, and now you have simply used a tip and the quick release itself on the pole, on the A10, then you now have a quick release once again right here on your A10. Now, that is one method that you can use to mount up the A10 on your boom pole and still have a quick release. The other way was created by a sound mixer named Yves-Marie Omnes. Now, he is a production sound mixer, I believe in France, but he has designed something called the A10 TX boom socket, which is laser printed with a bunch of plastic powder. And basically he has created a little clip, and I'll show you a video right now on the screen that shows him kind of going through the actual system itself. Now, it's very, very cool. It's very innovative. It's lightweight. It does not scratch your boom pole, as I understand it. And you simply just clip it onto your boom and it doesn't slide around or scratch or damage it. It comes in two different varieties, 15 millimeters, 18 millimeters, and 22 millimeters, designed for ambient, VDB, and Panamic poles. And if you're interested in getting one of these to mount your A10, then he refers to them as the A10 TX boom socket. And if you're interested in buying one of those, he's selling them, I believe, for 45 euros. And that should include shipping. Maybe it's plus shipping. I'll put it on the screen right there, along with his email address, which you can email him at yvesmarie.omnes@yahoo.fr. Opinionated much? This is, as you can imagine, a segment where it is all about my opinion. I'm going to give you my thought on something out there in the world that I would like to share my thought and opinion with you. Straight up, my opinion, not necessarily fact. It doesn't have to be your opinion. It is not trying to incite crazy riots and make everybody in the world change to have my opinion, even though it would make things a lot easier for me if you agree with me. But that is the entire purpose of this segment. Opinionated much is simply my opinion on something. And for this episode, I figured I would talk about what the difference is between positive and negative reinforcement. Now, I am a dad. I have 3 little girls. And one of the big things that we have been advocates for is not teaching them through negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement, let me go over the two differences right there. Positive reinforcement is simply rewarding a certain type of behavior positively. I do something good, I get rewarded like a paycheck, or I do something good and I'm given a candy bar or an ice cream, something like that. When you're potty training a kid, for example, one of the very first steps you usually do is some sort of positive reinforcement, teaching that kid that if you go potty, then they're going to get the milkshake or whatever it happens to be. There's also negative reinforcement where you yell at somebody, haze them, corporal punishment or whatever, if you even want to even go there. It's been done in history. That's why I mentioned it. But this is negative reinforcement for some sort of behavior where somebody does something and they get spanked, for example. A parent would spank their child. But there's a lot of people out there that confuse the two and do it wrong. Let me explain one way. In another life, I was a preschool photographer and I would go to different centers and photograph children. Well, there was some centers I would go to that would say, okay, come take your picture. Come take your picture. All right, good. Next kid, next kid, next kid. And there was always one or two kids that were stubborn and difficult. Those difficult kids, the people would always bribe, say, oh, no, here, have a jelly bean. Here, have an M&M. And the kid would not pay any attention to me or whatever. They would eat the jelly bean. I want another. Give me, freaking out, wanting another one. That was a bad thing because what did it prove? What did it teach? It taught the kid that they could beg and get another jelly bean or another M&M. Now, what is that actually? Positive or negative reinforcement? That is positive reinforcement of negative behavior. Don't fall into this cycle of rewarding your kids before they actually deliver or something to the like. What you want to do is positively reward positive behavior. And if you want to negatively reinforce, do so to negative reinforcement or negative behavior. But you don't want to get into the habit of positive reinforcement of negative behavior. For example, how would I handle that if I were in that circumstances the teacher was? I would give every child that properly took their picture and cooperated well a jelly bean or an M&M or whatever. The kid that did not cooperate, I'm not going to bribe that kid, say, here, take an M&M, because they're not going to do it. They're going to sit there, chow down on an M&M, give me another one, and that's all they're going to do until you're out of M&Ms or you're tired of it and they say, fine, you know what, you're not going to cooperate, and they go away. What I would do is I'd say, if you want an M&M, sit there and take your picture. That's how to do it. There's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Don't negatively reinforce or don't positive reinforce negative behavior. Otherwise, it's going to only get worse. This segment is called Wrong Answers Only. Now, as you can imagine, this is entirely dedicated to entertainment. There is no true information in this segment. So if you ask me if the color red is actually red, I will say no, it is yellow, because it is intended to be a wrong answer. If I am driving a Prius and you say, oh, wow, is that a Ferrari? I'm going to tell you all about the Ferrari I'm driving, even though it is not. It is a Prius. The only time you will ever believe anything I say in the Wrong Answers Only segment is right now, because I just explained it to you and we are now getting into it. So from here forth, into the future, if you hear me in the Wrong Answers Only segment, do not take me seriously at all. Now, for this first segment, I have received a question from Banjo Scott of Podcastage and the Banjo Says podcast. He asks, how should podcasters record, process, and release their shows? Well, being that he has Podcastage and he produces a podcast himself, it is very good that he asked this question, because he definitely needs to know the right way to do it. And as a pro sound guy, I can certainly answer this. Now, first of all, the more money you spend on your podcast, the better it's going to be. So if you spend no money on it on a weekly basis and you simply talk into your microphone, there's no value in anything that you're going to be releasing. You got to spend some money on your podcast. If you want to get yourself up in an airplane and be in an airplane for your entire episode and spend $1,000 up there, then you're going to have basically success as you are producing your episode. Another good note here about producing your podcast is a lot of people think that quiet is really what you want in your environment. It's total garbage. You got to have noises around you for people to listen to. Here's why. I'm talking. I want to give people a chance to process what I'm saying. I have a tendency of speaking kind of fast and maybe people can't follow me. So what you want to do if you're being a good podcaster, which I'm not right now, I'm just speaking nonstop, not giving you a chance to process anything. So if I were doing it the right way, I would build a pause into what I'm saying. The longer, the better. And then I give you things to listen to in the background. It is completely pointless to have it go completely dead quiet and basically not have anything for your audience to listen to. They got to hear something. Otherwise, they're going to get distracted and turn off the podcast. They got to hear something back there. It doesn't matter if it's your air conditioning unit or if it's your computer fans or whatever. The more the merrier. Give people depths of different things to listen to. The more noises that they have to listen to, the more entertainment they're actually providing. When I speak over all those noises, you don't hear them anyway, do you? So why does it matter if you have them on? Just leave them on and let it be done with. Now, another thing to keep in mind is you don't want to record into your computer at all. You want to get yourself some sort of an actual recorder that you can record into. The more money you spend on that, the better. So if you can do something like get yourself a professional sound recorder, like for example, the A10 Kantar X3 or the Zaxcom Diva 24 or the brand new sound devices Scorpio, something like that's going to be great. It has very, very high quality preamps, very, very low noise. It's going to give you great results. And something like that is really what you need. You don't want to get anything with an H in front of it to record your podcast if it's a Zoom product. You don't want to get yourself anything except the best. Like I said, you got to spend money in order to entertain, right? Most of the time, people that release podcasts to the world have no audience, or they have only one or two people listening. And the reason why is because they don't spend any money on it. People don't care what you have to say. I hate to say it. You don't care what I have to say either, do you? I didn't spend much money on this episode, with exception of showing you my Jellyfish lamp, which I spent $80 on. There's really no value in this podcast at all, is there? Because I'm not spending a whole lot of money on it. If I spend money on it, then you're going to have it. Something like a high quality recorder is definitely going to give value to my podcast, and I should record on something like that. Cables, doesn't matter. Get the cheapest cable you possibly can. As a matter of fact, this is way overkill for a podcast. You could get yourself a cheap microphone, the cheapest one you can find on Amazon, and it's going to be great. It's all in the recording that you do. Doesn't matter the quality of the microphone. If you record on a good recorder, it will filter it all out and it's going to sound wonderful. Now, as for your settings, if you have the option, which none of those three recorders have, to record in 32-bit floating point, then you absolutely want to do that. It is going to be the most amount of data. The higher the bits, the better. As a matter of fact, if this is released at some point in the future and you're watching this and there's something better than 32-bit floating point, then by all means, you want to do that. And nothing less than 192 kilobits per second should be ever considered. It's got to be as high quality as possible to get rid of all the badness in your production. And then when you get into your computer, there's a certain plug-in order that is very, very important. Very first thing you want to do is you want to compress everything up with an infinity to 1 ratio. So that way everything is basically all the same level. The entire podcast is normalized basically to have 0 dB. It's got to be up there. Otherwise, people can't hear it. If it's not 0 dB and it's bouncing around, your levels are up and down, it serves your audience no good. They're going to be riding the volume knob. So compress everything until it's completely flat as a flat line, and then people are going to be able to hear it. From there, do things like EQ your voice. And as a matter of fact, a good practice that professionals use is you roll off everything below 300 hertz. And that's going to make sure that you have completely eliminated any and all rumbles that could be in your track. Anything that's low and deep and rumbly is going to be rolled off. As long as you do something very aggressive like a fourth order roll off, then you have no issues at all. From there, and you've already rolled off those lower sounds, you want to go ahead and finish it up at that point and gate out anything below maybe 10 dB. So set your threshold to maybe negative 10 dB and basically knock out anything within an expander or gate below that. From there, feel free to process it however you see fit. De-ess yourself if you'd like to. No, that wasn't anything vulgar. And, mainly from there, save in as high quality as you possibly can. That's going to mean that your audience is going to want to hear a wave format. Now, if you're saying to yourself, I want to make sure that my audience gets great quality at a very small, because maybe they're downloading on dial-up, which mainly people don't do. But if you want to make sure that the quality is lowered a little bit so that people can easily download it, then the big thing there is, if you don't want to listen to it in high quality the way that the podcaster was intending it to be, then you're going to really want to make sure you scale it down. And in doing so, you're probably going to want to roll off anything above about 500 hertz and below 300 hertz. So that way your main sound is concentrating between about 300 and 500 hertz. And then from there, you want to save it as an 8-bit file. MP3 compressed as much as you possibly can. So that way, no matter how long your podcast is, it is not bigger than 1 megabyte. It's got to be below 1 megabyte. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to be downloaded and fit onto someone's phone if they're on dial-up. It's going to take them forever even to get your podcast with 1 megabyte. Distribution of your podcast is something that you definitely need to consider as well. If you're just doing an audio podcast and you are doing the high quality wave version, then you want to get yourself your own website. Now remember, you got to spend money if you want to have good quality, right? So the more expensive website you can possibly get is going to be better. Make sure you have a lot of space because you're going to be hosting a lot of WAV files. As a matter of fact, you want to spend a lot of money on a good high quality domain too. So go to something like Huge Domains, do a random searches for things like Microsoft, but with 2 T's instead of an FT at the end, and something very similar, that sounds very similar to another big company out there. If you do something like that, there's a good chance someone's going to accidentally sometime misspell the name of that company and end up on your podcast. So that's a little trick that you can use also to get some traffic. And people are going to say, oh, this is awesome. I just found a really cool podcast. I'm going to listen to that. And because you are buying one of these huge premium domains, it's going to cost a lot of money and people are going to recognize that quality in the quality of your show too. So that is obviously one of the best ways of doing it, and spend a lot of money for Google to push your podcast out to the masses too. Advertise as much as you possibly can through Facebook or through Twitter, and pay those fees so that way they promote your podcast to you. If you're releasing it through YouTube, for example, pay YouTube to constantly throw it out there as a sponsored whatever thing on the right-hand side. Let people see what it is and hear what it is too. Now, if you're wanting to go that low quality route, then the best possible way to do it is to make up business cards with your email address on that and encourage people to email you, and you will email them back the podcast. So those are the best possible ways that you can distribute your podcast if it's audio only. And if it's video, then the best way for you to do it is for you to rent time on a local cable channel, or, because if you get late at night, they have other programming that's usually like infomercials and stuff like that. Well, those are simply podcasts as well. It's just that they're usually with a host or something like that. But professional distribution of your podcast is going to be the best way that you have of potentially making money down the line, down in the future. So you're going to want to spend money and get yourself on the air, on television. Internet stuff doesn't work. It's new media and it's going to be all out there. The big guys are going to be all over that. So you're never going to be seen or heard. But if you buy the airtime on some stations and TV, then it's going to be absolutely wonderful and people are going to love it. But anyway, I hope this helps, Andrew. I really hope that this was informative to you. And, it's kind of unfortunate that you've been doing podcasts for now 4 years and you don't even know how to do a podcast. But thanks for listening to me, a professional sound person, tell you all about how to do it. Segment 5 is story time. People enjoy hearing my stories in the Masked Mike series, so I figured I would tell you yet more stories here in the SoundSpeeds podcast. Now, since we just had September 11th, and this was the 18th anniversary of September 11th, keep in mind that by the time that you listen to this, there are legal adults that were born after September 11th. So if you were around after or before September 11th and remember that day and the tragedy that it was, then you can look at that and think how old you are as you think about all the people that were born after September 11th. Now, people always ask about tragedies. Where were you when JFK was shot? Where were you on D-Day? Where were you when September 11th happened? Seems to be the more modern version for anyone, basically Gen X and maybe even millennial. So I'm going to tell you where I was September 11th. Early in the morning hours, I was building an internet relay chat, or encoding it into a website rather, for Lips Down on Dixie, which is the screen accurate version of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it is a cast that performs with the screen. It's also a theater group nonprofit organization. They do Dragon Con, and they have for over a decade now. To give you an idea. As a matter of fact, LDOD was a cast that I was one of the AP leaders at and head of security for about 2 years. Had a lot of fun with them. But it was early morning hours and I was redoing their website, and I decided I was going to do a chat room that was IRC, Internet Relay Chat. And I opened it up to the public, and somebody happened to bounce in. He was from New York. And normally when you were talking to someone in person, you don't ask them, hey, how's the weather? But considering this was the internet, I did ask him. And he said, oh, it's, beautiful week, not a cloud in the sky. And I said, where are you? He said, well, I'm pretty much just, I can see the Statue of Liberty from my place. I live right, off of Manhattan Island. He was not actually on Manhattan. I don't remember where it was. I think he's in New Jersey now that I think about it. But regardless, he was right there, and he said it was supposed to be not a cloud in the sky. I said, awesome. That's the way you really want it to be. On my drive into work, where I worked at the time as the station operations manager of WMLB radio station, which was an Americana radio station up and coming, very small. It was the sister station of WKGE in East Point. And if you've ever seen the tower, the smokestack looking thing in Atlanta that's white and has a vertical billboard on the side of it, that was where the sister station, WKGE, was based out of, as a side note. Now, the reason I'm giving that backstory is because I was on the morning drive to the radio station when I was listening to the regular guys, actually, not even our own content, because I didn't listen to Americana. But I was listening, and all of a sudden they said, wait a minute, what? Oh, wait a second. Some idiot flew a plane into the World Trade Center. Suddenly I'm thinking, I looked around outside and I said, there's not a cloud in the sky here. Only a few hours ago, someone said in Internet Relay Chat that it was supposed to be not a cloud in the sky in New York. Suddenly that hit me as this was not an accident. This was on purpose. So I made a couple of phone calls, got someone to put a video tape in her VCR, hit record, and start recording on as many VCRs as she possibly could. I brought her some tapes that night. I said, keep them recording. And so I have 7 days full of nonstop tapes recorded, because anyone who lived in September 11th and the times remember how crazy, how scary it was, how the news was being reported about September 11th and about all the scares that we had and who it was, and the presidential address and talking to our allies, and as things unfolded, it was quite amazing. But when I got to work, I talked to our sister channel, our general manager was down there. I talked to him. His name is Ron. And he said, I want you to keep the doors locked today to the radio station, because he was very concerned about someone coming in and hijacking radio stations. Personally, I don't know why, but he was a veteran and very, very knowledgeable. He knew radio stations, and he did not want our airwaves to be used if anybody was trying to take over the airwaves on the show, on the channel. So I went ahead and locked it up for the day, and we had a whole bunch of people for the next few days that were bringing us tapes and wanting to come in, and I would let them in, if they looked like a normal person. And they were saying, I've been called to by God, and God wants me to be a musician now. And I have made my first song, which is a celebration and tribute to the victims of 9/11. And as much as I appreciate the sentiment, there is no way I was going to be able to play all of this music. First of all, most of it was not Americana, and that was the format of our show, of our station. But also another thing is, these were like produced at your house. Like you hit record on a tape recorder, or today, even recording on your phone would be higher quality than a lot of these recordings were. And I didn't want to be rude, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, thanks, I'll listen to it. But none of them ever aired. It stayed Americana. As a matter of fact, the format that we went out over the air, it was completely ignoring the news. We didn't cover any of that. nor do we cover traffic. It was just Americana, and that's what the station was. But anyway, that's where I was September 11th, and if you want to tell me in the comments below where you were September 11th, I'd love to hear. Segment 6, Floating Point. See what I did there? Well, the floating segment here is something that can change on a weekly basis. If you want me to explain my setup, you can ask that as a question. If you'd like me to talk about the history of VCRs, I will do my best. Don't ask me that, for real. No, but seriously, if you want to ask me something, if you want me to do a particular segment on something, like for example, I taught martial arts for years. If you want me to talk a little bit about what I taught, then I would gladly do so in the floating segment. If you have anything that you would like me to discuss in the floating segment, you can send me an email at soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com. And for this first episode, John S. has asked me a question. So, questions answered. His question is, if you were immortal for a day, what would you do? There's a lot of gray area in there, and I'm glad there is, because it would be very easy to say something like, oh, if I was immortal, I would make myself, available to my government. I would go tackle some terrorists, whoever the people are, that are the top enemies of America. The problem is there's a lot of people out there in charge of national security that are a lot smarter about it than I am. I think it should be left more to them than me as an immortal, because there's also, like I said, gray area. Who knows if I were to be shot all over the place in an explosion and suddenly the end of the 24 hours expires and instantly I die from all those wounds. That would be terrible and not a very good way to go out, I might add, because it would be extremely fast, painful, and I would be thinking about nothing more for 24 hours until it finally did happen and that time frame passed. So I'm going to allow myself a little leeway here. I'm going to say if I were immortal for a day, that means that I could do anything I wanted to. Kind of like when you think immortals, you think deities and not the brand of microphone. I'm going to pretend to answer this question that I'm able to travel anywhere I want to. If I look someplace, I can almost teleport there. And in doing so, I'm going to also say that as an immortal, I do not feel anything, feel no pain. I could just go anywhere I want to and enjoy whatever it is. And at the end of the 24 hours, I become immortal again. And that's when pain and whatever, a mosquito would finally attack me. So you may say, what are you going to do? Well, I would do things that are impossible to do as a mortal. Now you may say, oh, what are you going to do? Take a swim in lava? No. I'll leave that to myself in Minecraft, which, no, I don't play anymore. I used to as a kid, or not a kid, a few years ago. But what would I do? I can tell you exactly what I would do. If my family couldn't go along with me, I would want to maximize that time and explore the cosmos. So, for example, I would zap myself to Venus and I would look around at the lunar rock and I would see how things were, how things looked on the planet Venus and see how much bigger the sun is in the sky. See how it is on the dark side of the planet versus the light side of the planet. I would zap over to Mercury, see how that is too. I might even travel into Jupiter and see how that is. Now, I probably wouldn't be able to see much after the outer smoke, but I'd be very interested to see if on some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, if there is life there. I might wander around there and see if there was anything. Since I can't feel it and I'm zapping there, it would be kind of cool to see. I would also maybe jump to some stars. I would float out into outer space and say, Alpha Centauri, you have Proxima, Proxima Centauri and Alpha Centauri A and B. Well, if they have any little planets around it, something like that, I might go exploring those and see if there's any life there. So that perhaps at the end of the 24 hours, I will have learned a few things about the world and could maybe tell scientists what that is. Because I think it'd be really cool to see, like, for example, I know on one of our, the stars, not stars, one of the moons of either Saturn or Jupiter, I think it's liquid nitrogen flows like waterfalls, and a lot of the land looks like it does on Earth, as I understand it, from a rock formation type thing, but it's all flowing very, very cold like liquid nitrogen. And I think that'd be really cool to see and be able to contrast to what we would see here. Go back and write some articles about it and maybe talk to people about it and have people not believe me because, who's going to believe that somebody was immortal for 24 hours? And if I could think of anything more entertaining than that, I would probably do that instead. But for right now, that is the best thing I could think of to what would I do if I were an immortal for 24 hours. Obviously, I would try to do some good deeds if I could, and I would probably actually ask my wife what would be some good deeds to do with that immortality if I could not be damaged or hurt or anything like that, and had the ability to teleport around. But that's probably what I would want to do the most, is zap around the cosmos and see things that no human will be able to do. We will not be able to go to other, planets and stuff light years and light years away, at least for a long time. Not within my lifetime, I would at least assume. But I could be mistaken about that. I'm mistaken all the time. Just ask my wife. Thank you for joining me on this first episode of the Sound Speeds podcast. Now, I'm going to give you one more opportunity for participation. In addition to the floating segment, and the wrong answers only, which you can email me if you'd like me to ask me a question or ask me to do something for the floating segment. You can send me an email to soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com, and I will gladly put it into a future episode of the podcast, should it be appropriate. And as for the last segment that you can participate in is going to be my outro. I have written out copy, and it should take you less than 20 seconds to read it out. And on a weekly basis, if you would like to do a voiceover of my podcast outro, then you can simply record it and send it to me. Make sure it's processed well. It doesn't sound like garbage. Record it on your cell phone in an airplane. Don't take my wrong answers only advice, I should say. Make sure it sounds good and sounds intelligible and that kind of thing. And I will plug you and your channel, if you happen to have a YouTube channel or a podcast, in the description below, if not on the screen at the same time as your voice. But if you would like to do that, then you can submit to me the audio that will not exceed more than 20 seconds and does sound good via email to soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com. Copies down below. Thank you for joining me in this first episode. You take care. If you'd like to ask a question for the wrong answers only segment or submit a suggestion for the floating segment, then send an email to soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com. If you'd like to showcase your voiceover talents by saying this outro, make sure it sounds good, doesn't exceed 20 seconds, and send it to the same email. Hit subscribe for more content both here and on SoundSpeeds.